August 28, 1944. 28,000 feet above Merseburg, Germany. Squadron leader David tightens his grip on the Spitfire's control column, eye scanning the formations of American B-17s stretching across the sky like a steel river. His wingmen hold position, for Merlin engines humming in practiced harmony. Then something impossible cuts through the bomber stream. A silver dart moving faster than anything he's ever seen. No propeller, leaving twin white contrails that slash the August sky like chalk on slate. The German fighter blurs past at 540 miles per hour and yanks his stick, throttle full forward. His Spitfire, Britain's finest, tops out at 408. The gap widens. The jet disappears into cloud, untouchable, unreachable, a future his own country's air ministry had called impractical flying circles around everything they'd built instead. The story begins not in the skies over Germany, but in a cramped workshop in Rugby, England, 13 years earlier. January 1930. Frank Whittle, a 23-year-old RAF flight cadet with ink-stained fingers and circles under his eyes, sits hunched over engineering diagrams that most of his instructors have already dismissed as fantasy. The pages show something revolutionary, an engine with no pistons, no propellers, just a continuous flow of combustion driving air through a turbine at temperatures that would melt conventional materials. Whittle's hands shake slightly as he compiles his thesis. Not from doubt. He's certain the mathematics work, but from exhaustion and the growing realization that certainty means nothing if no one will listen. His instructors at RAF Cranwell have praised his theoretical work while simultaneously suggesting he focus on practical matters. The phrase stings every time he hears it. What could be more practical than an engine that could push aircraft beyond 500 miles per hour, higher than 40,000 feet, into air too thin for piston engines to breathe? He submits his paper, Future Developments in Aircraft Design. The conclusion is clear. The propeller has reached its limit. At high speeds, propeller tips approach the speed of sound, efficiency plummets, and the entire concept becomes obsolete. The solution sits in his diagrams, a gas turbine that would revolutionize flight itself. The Air Ministry's response arrives 6 weeks later. Whittle reads it standing in the corridor outside the mail room, his breath fogging in the unheated space. The letter is polite, brief, and devastating. While his theoretical work is interesting, the practical challenges are insurmountable. The materials required to withstand such temperatures don't exist. The fuel consumption would be prohibitive. Resources must be directed toward incremental improvements to existing piston engine technology. His proposal is declined. Whittle folds the letter and slides it into his jacket pocket. He's 23 years old, and he's just been told by the most powerful air force in the world that his life's work is impractical. He patents the design anyway, using his own money. £5 he can barely afford. Patent number 347,206, granted January 16, 1930. The Air Ministry doesn't bother to classify it as secret. Why would they? It's just another young officer's impractical dream. While Whittle's patent gathers dust in the public record, someone else is reading it with intense interest. Dr. Hans von Ohain, a 22-year-old physics student at the University of Göttingen, Germany, hasn't seen Whittle's specific designs, but he's arrived at the same conclusion through independent research. The future of flight cannot be powered by reciprocating engines, turning propellers. It must be powered by reaction, by thrust generated directly from the engine itself. Von Ohain has an advantage Whittle lacks, a wealthy patron who believes him. Ernst Heinkel, aircraft manufacturer and dreamer of speed records, listens to the young physicist's presentation in his Rostock office in early 1936. Unlike the British Air Ministry, Heinkel doesn't ask for certainty or proven results. He asks a single question. How soon can you build a prototype? The answer is 3 years. 3 years of trial and spectacular failure, of compressors disintegrating and turbine blades melting into slag. 3 years of Heinkel pouring money into what many German engineers also call impractical. But Ernst Heinkel understands something the British Air Ministry doesn't, that the impractical becomes practical the moment someone succeeds in building it. August 27th, 1939. 4 days before Germany invades Poland. A small aircraft with a strange, smooth nose, no propeller, sits on the runway at Heinkel's Rostock-Mariani facility. Test pilot Erich Warsitz climbs into the cramped cockpit of the He-178. The whine of the He's 3 turbojet spools up, a sound unlike anything heard before, rising to a scream. Warsitz releases the brakes. The He-178 accelerates faster than any conventional aircraft, lifting off after just 800 meters. Warsitz's heart hammers as the airspeed indicator climbs past 400 miles per hour. The flight lasts 6 minutes. 6 minutes that prove everything Whittle knew in 1930 was correct, and that Germany, not Britain, will be first to prove it. Warsitz lands, shaking with adrenaline and the knowledge that he's just flown into history. The jet age has begun, but England doesn't know it yet. While Germany accelerates its jet program with Luftwaffe backing, Frank Whittle is still fighting for scraps. By 1936, the Air Ministry has softened slightly, granting him a modest contract, not because they believe in the technology, but because Whittle's persistence has become impossible to completely ignore. The amount, £5,000, barely enough for preliminary work. Whittle forms Power Jets Limited with a handful of partners, working from a cramped factory in Lutterworth with outdated equipment and insufficient funding. His prototype engine, the WWII unit, runs on a test bed for the first time in April 1937. It howls like a demon, consuming fuel at an alarming rate, vibrating violently, threatening to tear itself apart. It also works, generating thrust, proving the principle. But proving the principle isn't the same as building an operational engine. That requires money, and the Air Ministry continues to hedge. Yes, continue development. No, don't expect substantial funding. Yes, it's interesting. No, it's not a priority. Throughout 1938 and 1939, as Germany secretly perfects its jet technology, Whittle battles bureaucracy, insufficient materials, and the constant threat of his company's bankruptcy. His health deteriorates. He develops nervous exhaustion, sleeping 3 or 4 hours a night, chain-smoking, driving himself and his small team relentlessly forward. His marriage strains under the pressure. But every time he considers giving up, he looks at his engine test data and knows with absolute certainty, that this technology will define the future of air warfare. If only England would wake up and see it. The breakthrough comes not from the Air Ministry's vision, but from desperation. May 1940. Germany conquers France in 6 weeks. The Luftwaffe demonstrates air superiority over the Channel. Britain faces the possibility of invasion. Suddenly, experimental technology doesn't seem so impractical anymore. Suddenly, anything that might provide an edge deserves attention. The Air Ministry finally provides real funding. Gloucester Aircraft receives a contract to build an airframe around Whittle's W.1 engine. The timeline is aggressive. First flight by early 1941. It's 7 years after Whittle's first breakthrough, but it's finally happening. Britain will have a jet aircraft, except Germany already does. While Whittle celebrates his breakthrough, Messerschmitt Project 1065 is already taking shape in Augsburg. The Me 262, as it will be designated, represents everything the Luftwaffe has learned from 5 years of aggressive jet development. Twin Junkers Jumo 004 turbojets, swept wings for high-speed stability, tricycle landing gear, a design so advanced it looks like it's arrived from 1960. The first prototype flies on July 18, 1942, 6 months after Whittle's Gloucester E.28/39 makes its maiden flight. But the Me 262 isn't a proof of concept. It's a weapon. Test pilot Fritz Wendell pushes the prototype to 540 miles per hour in level flight, 100 miles per hour faster than any Allied fighter. The acceleration is breathtaking. The rate of climb surpasses anything in the Luftwaffe inventory. Most crucially, it can engage and disengage at will. No Allied aircraft can catch it. Reichsmarschall Hermann Göring visits Messerschmitt's facility in November 1943 to observe flight demonstrations. He watches the Me 262 scream past the reviewing stand, then climb away at an angle no piston engine fighter can match. For once, the bombastic Luftwaffe chief is speechless. When he finally speaks, it's a single question to Willy Messerschmitt. How many can you build? The answer is complicated. The Jumo 004 engines are temperamental, their turbine blades prone to failure after just 10 to 25 hours of operation due to Germany's shortage of heat-resistant alloys. Production is slow. Pilot training is difficult. Jets fly differently than conventional aircraft, requiring new techniques. But most problematic is Hitler himself, who has become obsessed with transforming every new aircraft into a bomber, regardless of its actual capabilities. Hitler visits the Me-262 demonstration in November 1943, the same month as Göring. He too is impressed, but his question reveals a fundamental misunderstanding. Can it carry bombs? Messerschmitt hesitates. Yes, mein Führer, but it's designed as a fighter. Then it will be our Blitz bomber. Hitler interrupts. To strike the invasion beaches, to bring terror to England. This single order delays the Me-262's deployment as a fighter by nearly 6 months. Precious time is wasted modifying the design to carry bombs it was never meant to deliver. But eventually, inevitably, the Me-262 reaches operational squadrons as what it was always meant to be, a fighter so advanced it makes everything else in the sky obsolete. July 26, 1944. Commando Nautny forms at Akmer and Hiesepe airfields near Osnabrück, Germany. Major Walter Nautny, one of the Luftwaffe's top aces, with 258 victories, takes command of the first operational Me-262 fighter unit. Their orders are simple. Intercept Allied bomber formations. Stop the daylight raids devastating German industry. Nautny's pilots are the best Germany has, veterans with hundreds of combat hours. But even they need time to adapt. The Me-262 lands fast and requires long runways, making it vulnerable during takeoff and landing. Its engines flame out of the throttle as it advanced too quickly. But once in the air, at altitude, with speed built up, it becomes something unprecedented. A fighter from the future hunting bombers from the past. August 28, 1944. Lieutenant James Finnegan, B, 17 pilot, 398 Bomb Group, holds formation at 28,000 feet over Merseburg. This is his 16th mission. He's seen Me-109s and FW-190s, dodged flak over Berlin, watched friends die in fire, and medal over the Ruhr. He considers himself a veteran. Nothing surprises him anymore. Then he sees the contrails. They're different. Most contrails drift lazily across the sky, marking the slow-speed ballet of conventional fighters maneuvering for position. These contrails are arrows, straight, fast, purposeful. Finnegan's throat tightens as two silver shapes materialize ahead of the bomber formation, growing impossibly large, impossibly fast. Bandits 12 o'clock. His top turret gunner's voice cracks over the intercom. Jesus Christ, look how fast. The Me-262s don't dogfight. They don't circle or jockey for position. They simply blow through the formation at 540 miles per hour, firing their 430 million Malawian Quachas, 108 cannons in 2-second bursts. AB, 17 two positions ahead of Finnegan explodes, not gradually burning, but instantly disintegrating as 30mm shells, each nearly as powerful as a small bomb, detonate inside its fuselage. Metal and men scatter across 6 miles of sky. Finnegan's waist gunner tries to track the jets. Impossible. They're gone before he can fully traverse his gun. Gone climbing away, untouchable. The entire attack lasts maybe 10 seconds. One bomber is destroyed, another trailing smoke. The Germans are already 2 miles away, completely safe from return fire, circling to set up another pass. Where the hell are our fighters? Someone shouts on the radio. The P-51 Mustangs escorting the bomber stream are the finest piston engine fighters in the world. They can fly 437 miles per hour at maximum throttle. When the Me-262s hit 540, there's no chase, no combat, no solution. The American pilots can only watch, cursing helplessly, as the German jets choose their targets, attack, and escape beyond any possibility of interception. This is not a fair fight. This is not even the same war. This is technological dominance, so complete it renders courage and skill almost meaningless. The bombers still reach their targets. There are too few Me-262s to stop the massed formations. But every crew member who encounters them goes home knowing they've seen the future. And in the future, everything they fly is obsolete. As German jets terrorize bomber streams, British officials quietly confront an uncomfortable truth. They had this technology first. Frank Whittle demonstrated a working jet engine in 1937. The Gloucester E.2839 flew in May 1941, more than a year before the Me-262. Britain could have deployed operational jet fighters by 1943, possibly earlier with proper support and funding. Instead, the Gloucester Meteor, Britain's first operational jet fighter, doesn't enter service until July 1944, the same month as the Me-262. And even then, it's restricted to defending England against V-1 flying bombs. RAF leadership, paranoid about the Germans capturing one, forbids Meteors from flying over enemy territory. The aircraft that could have hunted Me-262s over Germany instead patrols English skies, shooting down pilotless drones. The decision is strategic cowardice, masquerading as prudence. While Meteors play it safe over Kent, Allied bomber crews die over Germany, killed by the very technology Britain dismissed as impractical for more than a decade. Air Vice Marshal Donald Stevenson, Director of Home Operations, receives reports from bomber commanders describing jet attacks. He reads them in his London office, each one a reminder of opportunities squandered. One report is particularly stark. The enemy jets approached from astern at tremendous speed. Our gunners could not track them. Our escort fighters could not intercept them. We are defenseless against this weapon. Stevenson had been present at some of the early Air Ministry meetings where Whittle's proposals were discussed. He'd been among those who expressed skepticism, not because the science was wrong, but because it seemed too difficult, too expensive, too uncertain. Now the certainty is on the other side. The Germans have it. The British are catching up. And men are dying in the gap. In fairness, Germany's jet program is also troubled. The Jumo 004 engines are unreliable, catastrophically so. Many Me-262s are lost not to enemy action, but to engine failure. Production is slow, hampered by Allied bombing of German factories. Pilot training is rushed, leading to accidents. The jets consume fuel at rates Germany's shrinking petroleum reserves cannot sustain. But none of these limitations change the fundamental equation. When the Me-262 works, it dominates. Its pilots claim hundreds of Allied aircraft destroyed. Exact numbers are disputed, but the psychological impact is undeniable. For the first time since the Battle of Britain, RAF and USAF crews experience genuine technological inferiority. The side with numerical superiority, with better logistics, with victory nearly in hand, is flying aircraft from yesterday. The losing side has aircraft from tomorrow. November 8th, 1944. Major Walter Nowotny takes off from Akmer Airfield in his Me-262 for what will be his final flight. Commando Nowotny has been in action for 4 months, claiming significant successes, but also suffering painful losses, not primarily in air combat, but during takeoff and landing, when the jets are slow and vulnerable. Allied fighter commanders have adapted. They can't catch Me-262s in the air, but they can patrol German airfields, waiting for the jets to land. Nowotny knows this. Every pilot knows this. Taking off and landing in a Me-262 feels like running a gauntlet while wearing a target on your back. Nowotny climbs toward an inbound American bomber formation. He's attacking alone. His wingman experienced engine trouble and aborted. Alone but confident. He's one of Germany's most successful aces. He's flown 442 combat missions and survived. The Me-262 is the finest fighter he's ever flown. He presses his attack, diving toward the B-17s at 540 miles per hour. Something goes wrong. Perhaps an engine failure. The Jumo 004s are notorious for this. Perhaps damage from return fire Unlikely but possible. Perhaps simple bad luck. Nowotny's jet begins trailing smoke. He breaks off the attack, turning for home, rapidly losing altitude. His radio crackles, losing power, returning to base. He doesn't make it, whether from engine failure, pilot error during emergency procedures, or opportunistic Allied fighters catching him while crippled is never definitively established. Nowotny crashes near Bramsh, 8 miles from Akmar. He dies in the wreckage, age 23, holder of the Knight's Cross with oak leaves, swords, and diamonds. One of Germany's most decorated pilots, killed in the war's most advanced fighter. His death doesn't stop the Me-262 program. Jägerschwader 7 and other jet units continue operations through the winter and into 1945. But the loss of Nowotny, both symbolically and practically, damages morale. The jet that was supposed to turn the tide isn't turning it. There are too few Me-262s. Too many mechanical problems. Too little fuel. Too little time. Germany is losing the war, and even technological superiority cannot change the fundamental arithmetic of industrial production and resources. By February 1945, Me-262 production reaches 250 aircraft per month. Impressive, but the Allies are producing thousands of conventional aircraft monthly. By March, Allied armies are crossing the Rhine. Me-262 bases are overrun. Pilots flee west, away from the advancing Soviets. Some jets are deliberately destroyed by their own crews to prevent capture. Others sit on airfields, out of fuel, unrepairable, monuments to what might have been. April 10, 1945. Squadron Leader David Ince, the same pilot who watched helplessly as a Me-262 outran his Spitfire 8 months earlier, sits in a briefing room at RAF Manston, listening to an intelligence officer describe captured German jet technology. Photographs pass around the room. Me-262 wreckage, intact aircraft abandoned on airfields, technical diagrams recovered from Messerschmitt facilities. The intelligence officer is matter of fact. The Germans deployed this aircraft operationally in July 1944. They based it on research begun in the mid-1930s. Their first jet prototype flew in August 1939. He pauses, letting the timeline sink in. For comparison, our own jet research began seriously in 1940. Someone in the back of the room asks the question everyone is thinking. Why were we so slow? The intelligence officer doesn't answer directly. He doesn't need to. Everyone in the room understands that Britain had the inventor, had the patents, had the early advantage, and squandered it through bureaucratic caution and insufficient vision. The Germans, despite being wrong about nearly every major strategic decision of the war, were right about this. Jet engines were the future, and the future was worth investing in even when success was uncertain. Ince thinks back to that August afternoon over Merseburg, watching the Me-262 disappear into the distance, knowing his Spitfire, magnificent as it was, belonged to an era that had already ended. The Spitfire saved Britain in 1940, but by 1944, salvation required something else, something Britain possessed in theory, but failed to deploy in practice. The post-war reckoning is awkward and incomplete. Frank Whittle is knighted in 1948, receives awards, is celebrated as a pioneer. But the celebration cannot erase the years of dismissal, the decade of inadequate funding, the strategic myopia that allowed Germany to deploy operational jets before Britain despite starting later. Official histories are carefully worded, emphasizing ultimate victory while glossing over the near miss, the close call, the reality that technological complacency nearly cost everything. The numbers tell their own story. Germany produces approximately 1,400 Me-262s before war's end. Britain produces around 300 Meteors. Germany operates jets in combat over hostile territory for 9 months. Britain restricts its jets to home defense for most of the war. Germany's jets claim several hundred Allied aircraft destroyed. Britain's jets primarily shoot down V-1s. Important work? Certainly, but not the same thing. More significantly, after the war, both the United States and Soviet Union scrambled to acquire German jet technology and engineers. Not British technology. German. The nation that lost the war provides the technical foundation for the next generation of military aviation because they pursued it aggressively while others hesitated. Former Messerschmitt engineers consult on American and Soviet jet programs. Captured Me-262s are studied exhaustively. The swept-wing design becomes standard. The lessons learned in German engine development accelerate programs on both sides of the Iron Curtain. Britain's contribution is acknowledged, certainly. Whittle's patents are recognized as foundational. But the gap between conception and deployment is what history remembers, the decade when Britain possessed the blueprint for air superiority and chose incrementalism instead. The story of the Me-262 and Britain's jet development is not primarily about individual genius or failure. Frank Whittle was brilliant. German engineers were capable. The technology was achievable by the late 1930s given sufficient investment. The critical variable was institutional willingness to embrace uncertainty. The British Air Ministry made a rational calculation in 1930. Exotic technologies with unknown development timelines should not divert resources from proven systems facing immediate needs. This logic works, except when exotic technology is actually viable and your enemy develops it first. Then rational conservatism becomes strategic blindness. Germany made the opposite calculation. Desperate circumstances require aggressive innovation. By the mid-1930s, German military planners understood they could not win a conventional attrition war against Britain and France's combined industrial capacity. They needed technological edges. They invested heavily in jets, rockets, guided weapons, any technology that might provide asymmetric advantage. Most of these programs failed or came too late, but the Me-262 succeeded, at least partially, and for a few months in 1944 to 45 it provided exactly the kind of advantage Germany sought. The historical irony is thick. Britain's conservative approach to innovation was shaped by confidence born of victory in the First World War and faith in existing systems like the Spitfire and Hurricane. Germany's aggressive innovation was shaped by desperation and the knowledge that conventional approaches would fail. In the short term, both strategies made sense. In the long term, both nations learned painful lessons about the cost of their choices. By 1948, the lesson is internalized. The RAF operates multiple jet squadrons. The Royal Navy develops jet-capable carriers. British aviation companies produce increasingly sophisticated jet designs. The institutional culture that dismissed Whittle's proposals in 1930 no longer exists, but only because reality over Merseburg and a dozen other German cities forced its extinction. Standing on an airfield in 1950, watching de Havilland vampires streak across the English sky, it's difficult to remember that 5 years earlier, Britain was playing catch-up in a technology it invented. The jets look natural now, inevitable, as if this future was always coming and always assured. But Frank Whittle remembers. He remembers the letters of rejection, the years of insufficient funding, the struggle against bureaucracies that couldn't see past proven systems to necessary revolutions. He remembers being called impractical by institutions that would later scramble to deploy the very technology they dismissed. He remembers being right, and how little being right mattered without belief, funding, and institutional support. And sometimes, in quiet moments, he remembers that the first operational jet fighter to fly in combat belonged not to Britain, but to Germany. That men died fighting technology Britain could have deployed first. That the future arrived late because caution felt safer than vision. History records British victory in World War II. Deserved victory, hard-fought victory, righteous victory. But history also records that for a few desperate months in 1944, the sky over Germany belonged to jets Britain dismissed as impractical. And sometimes the price of being careful is being second. And sometimes being second costs lives. And sometimes the impractical thing you refuse to build is exactly what you need when the future refuses to wait for you to catch up. The Me-262 flew for 9 months before Germany's collapse made further operations impossible. In that brief window, it proved everything Frank Whittle had argued in 1930. Jet propulsion was practical, achievable, and transformative. It proved everything the Air Ministry had dismissed. The future could be built if you were willing to attempt it. It proved that tomorrow belongs to whoever is brave enough, or desperate enough, to build it today. Britain eventually caught up, built superior jets, won the peace. But over Merseburg in August 1944, Squadron Leader David watched Germany's impractical fantasy scream past his Spitfire and understood, the future doesn't care about your timeline. It arrives when it's ready. And if you're not ready with it, you watch it fly past at 540 miles per hour, untouchable, unstoppable, undeniable.